All right, welcome back, everybody. And thank you, Chloe, for supporting the community and supporting the DEF CON Red Team Village, as well as the Texas Cyber Summit event today. And without any further ado, I pass it back to you, and thank you again.
Thank you, Omar, for having me, and thanks, everyone. Hi, I hope everyone is doing well. I'm very excited to do this talk with you. Before I start off, I'm just gonna let you know that I like to focus on my slides when I'm doing a presentation, so I will have my camera off, but I'll put my camera back on for Q&A. Now, I will be keeping an eye on Discord, but please note that I'm not gonna answer your questions until the very end, just in case if I do answer your questions throughout my talk. So if you want to ask questions, feel free to. In the Texas Cyber Discord, but under track 3 briefings under Cyber Jungle. So I just want to let you guys know that I am in there and I'll be monitoring, and by monitoring, I will be there to answer all your questions that come in on hacker rights. And if you want to talk about burnout, we can do that too later, because that is another thing that many of us are experiencing. So let's dive into it, shall we? So excuse me 1 second while I get my slides all ready for you guys. All right, and here we go. All right, I hope everyone can see my screen. All right, I'm turning off my video, but I promise I'll put it back on, so don't worry, it will be back on. All right, so everyone, we're going to talk about hacker rights. And yes, you're probably like, wait, do we have rights? Did I not know about this? Well, let's just start with saying don't really have rights at all, but this is a talk for you to be aware of what is the situation right now and how to be safe and to know how we can change it. So just to let you guys know, my background is poli-sci. So one of the things that I wanted to talk with you about is how do we get public awareness involved, because public awareness is something that we really need to have to be able to get rights. So I broke it down for us. So even if you're not a poli-sci person, at the end, you'll be able to understand the basic concept of how to bring public awareness and the need for it, because that's the only way we're going to get change, right? So if you're wondering who I am, my name is Chloé Messdaghi. I am the VP of Strategy over at Point 3 Security. And when I'm not doing that, I'm an ethical hacker advocate, meaning I look around in our community and I ask everyone what are the things that they wish that they could change about the community to make it better. And then I do whatever I can to do that. If that means doing something around getting more women in the field, especially in bug bounty, then I will be doing that. If it's about getting us some rights and having some awkward conversation with some politicians and press, that means I will be doing that. If it's about trying to bring awareness to burnout to your employers, I do that too. When I'm not doing that, I'm the president and co-founder of WOSEC, also known as Women of Security. And I'm also the founder of Women Hackers, which is a non-binary and woman private platform that allows hackers to hack at all levels and to connect with each other all around the world virtually. I'm also the podcaster for ITSP Magazine, The Uncommon Journey with Phil Wiley, which I'm pretty sure you guys are very familiar with him, and Alyssa Miller. Also the Hacker Book Club organizer. My co-organizer is Angela, and she also helps me with our wonderful book club. So we have sessions every month. And by every month, we start a new book every month, and we have sessions every week, and it's at 5 p.m. Pacific time on Tuesdays. We are wrapping up Cult of the Dead Cow, and we'll be starting a new book in 2 weeks' time. So come and join us. We basically read books about hackers, and the hacker community reads them. And yes, the authors do join, and people that are mentioned in the book also join. And we had a really, really good time with many other books, and Cult of the Dead Cow has been really exceptional. We've had the actual members join us while we're reading throughout the book, and the authors also. It's been a really great experience. All right, and yes, that is my website if you want to know where I'm speaking at next, or if I'm in the press, if you want to know what articles I talk about and why I hate certain technologies, you can find that there too. And that is my Twitter handle and Instagram. And yes, my DMs are always open, so feel free to reach out whenever. So let's go into the real thing why we're here. So we're going to talk about the agenda. What is the current landscape for us right now? Why are we so scared? We will dive into that too. Then we'll be diving into the poli-sci part, which is influence in the public. So I want you to understand that there's 3 parties that take a huge role in making any change. One is the media. And if you're wondering, what is this, the media? Isn't that just the press? No, it's not. It's marketing and media. So, and by marketing and media, I mean marketing and the press. Something to know about when it comes to marketing, it's not just companies that are outside of InfoSec. There's a lot of companies in InfoSec that still paint hackers in a negative way. So those are things that need to change. Also organizations or businesses to support bilateral trust between a hacker and themselves when disclosing. And last but not least, legislation. We need politicians to be a little bit more aligned of what is happening in the world, especially in the hacker scene. And then next steps, which I'm going to need you to help me get to where we need to go. Here we go. So let's go in the current landscape. And I know you're already like, no, this is really scary, but let's dive in it together, okay? I promise you, you will be happy at the end of this. So let's first dive into some other things though first. So raise your hand behind your computer right now if the Equifax breach impacted you in some sort of way or a family member. I'm just assuming many of your hands are raising right now. But did you know a security research warned Equifax that it was vulnerable to a kind of attack that later compromised the personal data of more than 147 million Americans? Motherboard learned that 6 months after the researcher first notified the company about the vulnerability, Equifax patched it, but only after the massive breach that made headlines had already taken place, according to Equifax's own timeline. Or better yet, what about Capital One, you guys? How many of you had that impact to you? Raise your hand. And yes, I'm thinking that you're actually raising your hand, okay? Play along with me, please. It's Saturday. Okay, anyway, back to this. Capital One. According to the federal complaint, the breach took place in stages across March and April of 2019. But Capital One became aware of the problem on July 17th when a security researcher tipped the company to a public GitHub page that was displaying something that looked an awful lot like private Capital One data. But the real question is here, well, what if no one reported the breach or the vulnerability ahead of time? Because the reality is that 60% of security researchers don't report vulnerabilities. And if you're wondering who is the person in that corner, that is Amit El-Azhari. She is one of the people that's been pushing safe harbor for our community and was the first one really to research what is going on and how many of us are actually reporting the vulnerabilities. Now, if you're wondering, okay, so what is the 60%? And this has a lot to do with the fear of being prosecuted. And it's really sad because it was this research that also, once again, showed a time over again and again that our laws are preventing good hackers what they do best, protecting you and me and everyone that we love. And so that's why it's really important to dive into how do we fix this problem? So overall, why are hackers scared again? It's besides prosecution, let's be also real. Looking for contact information and reading policies have been a burden to reporting vulnerabilities. How many of us have spent hours looking for contact information to report a vulnerability? Sometimes it takes hours, sometimes it takes days, sometimes it takes weeks. And then we're already at the point where we're like, well, I'm already putting myself at risk by even sharing anything. So what is the point of me doing this? Not just that, but those policies, has anyone really read them? Let's be real, some of us haven't. And a lot of it because for some of us, English is a second language, or we're not an attorney. So how do we interpret these things so we make sense of it? So these are some of the issues of why hackers are scared. But even if we are reporting a vulnerability in a legal way where there's bilateral trust, sometimes it doesn't play out well for us. For example, this case. So after DJI, which is a drone manufacturer, launched a bug bounty program on their own, two researchers, Sean Miller and Kevin Fansteer, for this, they wanted to check out the scope and they wanted to confirm it. So for the scope, the bug bounty program covered all the security issues within the firmware, application, and servers, including source code leak, security workaround, privacy issue. and they were working around a detailed user guide for it. So he basically asked them to confirm the scope, and it took them 2 weeks to finally confirm it. He then reported the vulnerability with his friend Sean, and they were provided with a financial reward for the finding. So Kevin was given $30,000 for this finding. However, the agreement of receiving it offered no legal protection for him. So he decided he will walk away. The revelations resulted in the company challenging the researchers' findings and seemingly threatening one with a lawsuit tied to the Computer Fraud Abuse Act, also known as CFAA, claiming he went out of scope regardless to the fact he made sure to confirm the scope. In return, he posted the entire situation with all conversations with the DJI publicly. And if you check this out, it is a good read. Okay, so believe it or not, so when he says, you know what, I'm not signing this, you're not going to protect me, or I see no protection of receiving those funds, and walks away from $30,000, DJI had internal messaging throughout that email, sharing it across teams, and it went through their press and marketing team. And you can see in the email chain itself was, we need to scare him, he's going to cause us a problem. And so they didn't realize at the time that when they responded to his message, that chain was actually part of that email itself. So yeah, so he basically published the entire emails and messaging and all of it. Anyway, yeah, they totally dropped the case. It was a real embarrassment and bad PR for them. But yes. But this is the thing to note about, is that even when you're playing safe and whatnot, you still have to be concerned all the time. And this is one of the reasons why I want you guys to do the following thing. Hopefully you aren't doing this, but keep a paper trail. You need to keep records of everything you've ever done, all right? This is so important. You need to protect yourself. But also note that if you're disclosing something in a private program or something that is not even a bug bounty program or a vulnerability disclosure program, do not disclose it to anyone. And please don't exploit it, because when you do, you are running into a situation. But overall, I want you to understand that the language and what is in scope or out of scope and disclosing, or how to disclose, can be so scary, and potential indictments especially, and it can keep all parties awake at night. And what I mean by all parties, even a program manager, because a program manager is also asking to be hacked, but not to get hacked badly. And the other thing is, how to conduct and handle situations when researchers report something is still something that people are still trying to learn. So just please note about that, is that you even have the government who's totally into this. You know, we have hacked the Pentagon, we have hacked the Army and whatnot. So government does support us, but at the same time, they're not taking the necessary steps to protect us. And I know this is a scary subject, and this is probably the scariest part of it all, of this talk. So I want to show some pictures of some puppies and make you guys feel happy, because it is scary, but puppies do lift your spirits. And I know for you guys, if you're a cat lover, I did put a little cat picture if you can find it in there, because, you know, inclusion. But yes, I'm definitely a dog fan. I have 2 already. But I want to dive more back into this. Why are people scared of us? Even though ethical hackers are not malicious actors, they're still being seen and treated as such. And because of this, it reduces the chances of reporting a vulnerability and can cause hackers to go to the dark side because they're seen as the same. And you're probably wondering, wait, what? I'll get to that in a second. But first, if you cannot see, but to the left is what we see when typing in criminal hackers, and to the right is what we see when we type in ethical hackers. Once again, they're both this hoodie and darkness figures. And we won't even get started on the ski mask. Come on, that is like, that stuff drives me. I think that's my pet peeve, you guys, is the ski mask thing, because I have really sensitive skin on my face. So if I wear a ski mask, I'm gonna be itching like crazy. Do you think I'm gonna wear that when I'm looking for something and trying to focus? No. Also, I can always cover my camera. Anyway, but the thing is, when I said earlier about hackers can go to the dark side because they're seen as the same, I want you to think about it this way. If you already think that being a hacker is already a crime as it is because you have no rights, but you can get paid more if you go to the other side of it, I mean, it makes sense in many ways. We shouldn't do it now, but I do understand it. Because, you know, it's one of those things that's really sad to note is that until we have rights, what is the point of being what we are? And the thing is that no matter if we're on a good side or a bad side, we're still dealing with insomnia. We're still being afraid to report anything regardless. So the thing is that at the end of the day is that we really do need to get rights. And because I believe rights can shift everything, I feel like it will make us become more ethical hackers in the end because we see appreciation and we're getting paid the way we should be getting paid. But I also want to go into the other point here, right? So it's not just imagery either. It's also the language used in the media. And we see this a lot in marketing and the press. So if you see here, this is what you get when you type in hackers. It's always seen as something negative. And one of the things that I try to do is when I see the press covering hackers in a bad light, I always correct them. I will always write a message underneath, or I'll DM them, or I'll give them a call and give them a real rich respect of what is a hacker. And I ask for you guys to do the same, because the only way that they're going to learn is if we tell them, hey, those are actually not hackers. Those are cyber criminals. There's a difference between us. Anyway, but I want to go into how does this imagery and language impact us? So the thing is that with the images themselves and the language that's being used, it continues to feed the fear and stereotypes and biases that exist through social constructed beliefs of what is a hacker. And if you know me, we always dive into the brain in every conversation. So let's go into this. There's a trigger here. And so I want you to get to know two parts, okay? So in the temporal lobe and the green part that you see on the left side of your screen, perhaps, you will see that the temporal lobe's there. The amygdala is part of the temporal lobe. And the temporal lobe and the amygdala play a really huge role when it comes to taking in new beliefs systems. So I want to dive into that section really fast with you, because I think if you know how the brain works, you'll have a better understanding how we can get public awareness and how we change these things. So let's go first with this. So the amygdala, as you may know, it's a subconscious part of your brain that is the fight versus flight mechanism. But by fight versus flight mechanism, I want you to actually think of it not like that, but it's more of like, this person's like us and who is not like us. So if the person is like you and has something in common with you, then you feel like there's a connection. So you no longer are as afraid of them. We're more afraid of strangers that we have nothing in common with because we don't know, because we don't talk to strangers sometimes. So the other thing about the amygdala, it is your emotional part of your brain. So what's happening is, say, for example, that you were told at a young age to be afraid of someone with pink hair, that pink hair people are dangerous. This is a socially constructed belief. You probably were told indirectly through the media by seeing videos and footage of people with pink hair committing horrendous acts of crime, such as looting or, I don't know, anything from stealing, from murder or whatnot. It's even in movies. Even your parents tell you, be careful, people with pink hair. Your teachers say, be careful with pink hair because they're dangerous individuals. Well, anyway, you have a fear now of people with pink hair because you have now been programmed to believe that people with pink hair are dangerous. But the good news is that when the amygdala is flashing, saying, warning, there's someone with pink hair near you, it has to send a message to the prefrontal cortex of your brain. Now, the prefrontal cortex acts like the CEO of your brain, and it basically tells it whether or not it needs to simmer down or to act on it. So say you are you're walking down the street and you see someone with pink hair, maybe you'll clutch your purse or your bag a little bit closer. Maybe you'll cross the street when you see them because you're just kind of afraid of them. Well, the thing is that before you take such actions, it has to first check into the prefrontal cortex. So this is the only time that you can actually question and verify if this person is an actual threat. So think about it this way. Say, for example, that you saw something that was not what you've been told, it went against your socially constructed beliefs that people with pink hair are dangerous. Say you came across a YouTube video of them talking about how hard it is to be someone with pink hair, because the thing is, with having pink hair, people think you're a criminal. And you see people holding their bag closer, that you see them take multiple steps far away from you when you're in the elevator or you cross the street to avoid them, that you lock your doors because you see them with pink hair and they're so dangerous because that is a belief you've been told indirectly throughout your life. But then this one video, the person with pink hair tells you that it has impacted them so much that they can't get jobs sometimes, that they are already dealing with so many other issues. And that's the whole point right now, right? Is the person with pink hair is a victim now because of these socially constructed beliefs. So the thing you're probably wondering is like, okay, so we are all programmed to be biased. Yes. And that is a survival mechanism. But the thing is, I want you to take away is that you can always change and challenge those beliefs, but it has to take you to be okay with being uncomfortable, to look at yourself in the mirror and to question yourself and your knowledge and the things that you know. Just know that you don't know everything, and so does the people around you don't know everything. So I want you to think about it that way, is that people are seeing images and languages that say that hackers are terrible criminals, when in reality, there is a huge difference between a hacker and a cyber criminal. And that's the main takeaway. Because how many of you guys have dealt with a situation when you tell someone you're a hacker or you work with hackers, someone takes a step back away, or their mouth drops, or their eyes get a little bit bigger, they get a little bit as if like, I don't know, the hair went up on their arms or something. Yeah, that happens all the time, right? And that's the thing that I'm trying to tell you, is that the only way we're gonna get past that is if we start sharing our personal stories with the world. And what I mean by that is that we can talk amongst each other in InfoSec, because that's what we do best, is that we stay within our group and we talk about things and issues that really impact us and hurt us and all that, but we're talking it over with other people in the same group. We are never gonna get rights, you guys, if we don't share outside our group. We need people to know who we are, what we do, so they don't get afraid of us, so they understand us, so they hear our stories, because that's the only way that you can scientifically change someone's behavior, is by telling your story and for them to listen. And that's the most important thing, right? Communication can change the world. And so sharing our stories, having people understand that, no, that is not correct. We don't always wear black hoodies. We don't always work in a basement. No, we don't always work in the dark. That's something they need to know, because they're not being challenged. The press is not being challenged by it, you guys. They still do it all the time. Marketing, even if you go to RSA conference or Black Hat, you still see these marketing booths with hackers on it as if they're bad people. And because they've never talked to us, which is one of those things that's really aggravating. But that's the thing, is that we need to go and approach them. We need to let them know that they have it wrong. Because if we don't do that, we're never going to change anything. And we have to get out of our comfort bubble to let them know, and to let them know our stories. Because when we do that, when we start sharing our stories with the world, when we start trying to push the press and marketing to have it right about who we are and represent us, changing that imagery and that language, this is what we're dealing with until then. Still, 93% of Forbes Global 2000s don't have a vulnerability disclosure policy. And 60% of us don't report vulnerabilities. And we still have laws that are so out of date. and they prevent us from doing what we love best, and that's protecting people, finding vulnerabilities. How far does that foxhole go? I'm curious. And that's the thing. We're still prosecuting ethical hackers because there's no bilateral trust yet that needs to be out there more. And we are, in return, we're seeing an increased number of malicious hackers. And that's why we need to change that. So overall, I want you to understand the main takeaway from this slide is the mindset set by society, by people in the media, that is keeping us unsafe and preventing hackers what we do well in. And companies are afraid of hackers and don't want to create vulnerability disclosure policies because of lack of bilateral trust amongst hackers and organizations and government. It is one of the reasons why 60% do not report vulnerabilities, and hackers are scared of outdated laws such as the CFAA and DMCA. Also, from interviewing black hat hackers, which I hate using that term, so I would just like to say cyber criminals or malicious actors, okay, you guys? We can use those terms. I think we all can agree on that. But one of the reasons they decide to move away from ethical hacking is the pay and the constant worrying of being prosecuted regardless if they did something legal. And this is also said similarly by those who switch from being a malicious actor to becoming an ethical hacker. And the reason that they switched was the insomnia of being arrested. It just got to them that they were like, you know what, I just want to do this as legal as possible. Because we're still dealing with a situation here that there are cases when organizations prosecute ethical hackers regardless if they were in scope. And if you are not aware of these three things, you need to be aware of them. So I'm going to dive into this because I just think you need to know. And just thought I should let you guys know I am not an attorney. So please note that. I am an activist, but I'm not an attorney. So just keep that in mind. But we need to dive into current legislation that can be found in most countries around the world towards hackers. So the anti-hacking laws, what those are is basically a law that prohibits accessing a computer without authorization or in excess of authorization. This is used when a researcher goes out of scope. This is the act used to prosecute hacking. And in the US, we call it the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, the CFAA. And by the way, a random fact, but if you've seen the movie War Games, did you know that that was actually watched by Ronald Reagan? And when he watched it, he freaked out completely about hackers. And it's like, we need to do something about this. We need to do something about this like now. And that is how the Computer Fraud Abuse Act came about from War Games, which is one of my favorite all-time hacker movies. But that is how it got inspired. Also, let's go into anti-circumvention laws. These are also known as copyright laws. In Canada, it's called the Copyright Act. And here in the US, it's the DMCA. Now, if you're wondering what is it, it's the right to repair. So reverse engineering is seen as a breach of property to some companies. Now, the last part, acceptable use policy. Who here has ever read their terms and conditions, say for an Apple product? Okay, I'll be honest, I tried, I got really, really bored. So I decided to watch a movie instead. But in general, they can be very long and too much verbiage. It can confuse anyone, especially if English is not their first language. And this can lead to some serious miscommunication issues for ethical hackers, even if they speak English or if they don't speak English or English is a second language. But I want you to take a look at those dates of the anti-hacking laws and anti-circumvention laws. So we got one from 1988 and the other one's 1984. Clearly, these laws are definitely out of date. I mean, this was before Y2K, right? And honestly, they were really created out of fear. And as we know from fear, what happens when people are afraid? They come up with things that don't actually work well. As Ronald Reagan's situation, he watched War Games and he freaked out without actually talking to the InfoSec community to see how can I do this in a way that protects everyone and have people protect us. He didn't do that. And that is the issue we're facing, right? A lot of laws are created out of fear. There's no empathy in it. And that's the issue that we're facing still today, right? It's like by not having empathy to take the time to understand what is needed and why laws should only prosecute malicious actors, AKA criminals, and not good hackers, that was something that didn't come up. And this has something to do with not having representation, not having a voice in the community. And we have this issue in InfoSec when it comes to government. We don't really have these conversations. And we don't have a lot of legislators that understand us because they're not taking the time to understand us, or they don't even see us as a situation or a problem. Because once again, we don't go outside our community to talk about the problem. Usually we talk about it amongst ourselves. And overall, what I want you to understand is that these laws are preventing good hacking in the same way they're preventing bad hacking. And we need really good hacking. Because with improvements to legislation, we can change that previous slide you guys remember. But in order to do that, we must dive into the 3 categories in which we've already touched on because they work together to bring about public change. So how do we get there? Well, I'm glad you asked. We got to influence the public cycle. So basically how this works is, in order to have rights for hackers, we need to get the public on board. In order to do so, we need to dive into these 3 categories: organizations, media, and legislation. We need the press to push for public to become aware. In other words, we need to change the language and imagery of a hacker and to start using cyber criminals as a term for those who commit unethical hacking. Overall, really separate the 2. Now, in order to help the press, organizations need to be on board with bilateral trust, with having vulnerability disclosure programs. By showing they support hackers, the public then changes their view in general. And lastly, to have the organizations and public opinion to push and motivate Capitol Hill to get on board and update the current legislation that will protect ethical hackers. Overall, we need all 3 to be supporting the hacker rights for it to become a reality. So overall, we need to push for awareness of ethical hackers. And these are the 5 needs to get there. Now, how we get there, I need you. We need to change our language and imagery in InfoSec, meaning use the term hacker to describe yourself. If you are an ethical hacker, which I hope you are. And also what we need to do is, if we do see it in the press, showcasing hackers in a negative light, we need to remind them to use a different term. And when we see them using the imagery of the dark hooded figure or ski mask, correct them. So we do need to work with the media on this front. And I do it all the time. So if I'm talking to the press, they'll be like, so what do we do about these hackers that are attacking this? I'll be like, you mean cyber criminals? So just let them know, because they don't know. That's the reality. They don't know. They don't know any better because they don't know. So until they have that information, they're not going to make that decision. So we need to let them know, right? We need society to notice the everyday heroes. In other words, they need to hear your story. So share your story with the public. Don't just go like in your community, go outside your community. And that's the greatest thing about Twitter and LinkedIn and Facebook and Instagram, but also just talking to your local press. Let them know what you do. We also need organizations to have vulnerability disclosure programs. If you work for a company that does not have a VDP program, you need to talk to them, because every company should have that. So at least there's some sort of trust. And last but not least, we need representatives to update today's legislation. So how are we going to do that? Until we have public opinion and public awareness, it's going to be very hard for us to do that, because they might listen to us, but there won't be a push until there's public opinion along with it. So the first step together that we can do is, I created this petition, and this is for anyone who supports ethical hackers and want to bring about a change. It doesn't have to be a hacker who signs this. It could be anyone in the community. It could be your family, it could be your friends, and so on. But the first step is that we need to do this. And how this is broken down is by organizations, legislators, the media, and the hacker community. So for example, everything I've talked about is on here. So in here, we ask for organizations to implement policies that clearly define a scope, what kind, if any, rewards, a contact information, because come on, you should have that already. Communicate updates on submission. Yes, I want to know, has it been fixed? And the extension of bilateral trust to include non-retribution. Basically, if you are agreeing to having this, bilateral trust is the only way we're going to do this. And then also, if you are wondering if there are companies out there that do practice like quote unquote safe harbor, but I like to say bilateral trust, meaning they have clear policies already written out, you know how to contact them, what kind of rewards to expect and whatnot. Go check out this disclose.io. It's a really cool site that basically uses crowdsourced knowledge to knowing what companies are practicing bilateral trust. And if you need to find contact information, usually it's there. I think there's like more than 1,000 companies listed on there. So check it out. It's great. But we also need politicians to get to know ethical hackers instead of seeing them as cyber criminals. So we're asking for new legislation or productive additions to the current legislation that doesn't penalize us. And last but not least, media. We need them to really stop portraying ethical hackers as malicious actors and change the imagery. And to use the term cyber criminals, not hackers, when it's in a negative way. And yes, I had to put one line in there about the hacker community because I really want you guys to know from experience in the bug bounty field is please stay within scope. Just please do it. And just if you go out, accidents happen and whatnot. But if you exploit something, then it's not an accident anymore. So please don't do that because when you exploit, trust is broken completely. It only takes one of us to break trust because it's already a very thin line. And that goes both ways. We don't really trust companies and companies don't really trust us. So we have to be very careful of what we do because we want to build that trust over time. And yes, so please sign this and share it around. We have over 1,000 signatures. And I'm right now working on getting a team together that will help this. So if you have a public policy background, a legal background, or a press background, DM me. Let's talk. I'm looking for some team members to help me on this because I can't do this by myself. So main takeaways from all this, I just want you guys to know is that, overall, ethical hackers deserve protection and rights. We do. Current imagery and language has been very misleading in the public over time, and we need to work together to change the public's perception. And that means sharing our stories. That also means us looking at ourselves and making sure that we keep ourselves in check. But also sign and share this petition. Check out disclose.io. I think it's a really good source of a future for sure of all different companies that believe in hackers and want to have that bilateral trust amongst us. I love it. Also share this talk. I think that's really cool. But once again, I want to reiterate this, that the most importantly, that a change starts with you and me. It's not that's the thing, right? At the end of the day, it's what are we doing that is helping the situation or making the situation worse? And we need to really analyze that and see what can we do to make ourselves better to fight for this movement, because we need this, you guys. We so need this desperately. We needed it a long time ago and so on. And the only way we're going to do that is if we look at ourselves and see what am I doing that's hurting this and what are the things that I can do to strengthen it. Because that is the truth, is we have to get outside our comfort zone to get comfortable with the reality around us. And last but not least, I want to say thank you guys for existing. Thank you guys for also having me here. And yes, I just put my camera on because I promised I would. And just note that I know it's a really, really hard time in the world, and burnout is definitely happening for many of us. So I just want you guys to know that if you're dealing with burnout, there's a few things that you can do. Take a break. Take one day of a tech detox, I call it. I know it sounds like a goop kind of thing, like a Gwyneth Paltrow thing, but what it is basically stepping away from all your devices, your phone and all that, and take a day to recharge your batteries in any sort of way. Or take one day of the week to do everything that's not InfoSec related. That should help you a lot. And during that time, just note that like if you can't take care of yourself, you can't take care of others. So it's so important for you to take the breaks that you need because it's more important than ever before. And last but not least, I think I have a resource page here. Yeah, there we go. So here's a quick resource page for those that are wondering. This is where you can find the ITSP magazine link if you want to watch, and by watch I mean listen to all the stories. So we talk to influencers out in InfoSec that basically you may follow on Twitter, and we ask them how they got into the space and what suggestions and advice they have. The Hacker Book Club link is right there. We do it via Goodreads and Zoom. The Ethical Hacker Rights Petition link is right there. It's also pinned to the top of my Twitter feed, so feel free to retweet it and also to sign it yourself. Check out disclose.io. I really mean it. It's a really cool site to have a good idea of what the future could look like together. And then the last 4 things are for around COVID-19. I want you guys to know that there is a crisis text line. Check it out. It's in Canada, the US, and the UK. The National Suicide Prevention Hotline, 24-hour domestic violence hotline, and disaster distress helpline. If you guys can do a favor, even if you are like, okay, I don't understand why these links are here, or phone numbers are here, can you please take a photo of that for yourself? And the reason for that is because I think we all know someone at some point through this entire pandemic that's dealing with some serious issues. And it's really important for us to share these 4 last resources on this chain. It's really important for them to know that there are these wonderful resources for them, because I feel like that's something that we need to have. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. So hello again. And I'm going to check out here. All right, I'm going to see what are the questions. So feel free to ask questions, because now I'm in Discord. Let's see here. Nice. Okay, let's see here. Come to the dark side, we have cookies. I love that. That's such a good image. All right. I'm seeing it. Oh, I see some people typing, so I'm just gonna sit here and wait for your guys' questions to come in. But in the meantime, I could keep telling you about burnout, because I've been getting a lot of DMs about burnout, how to deal with it. Really taking a day off or taking a few days off is the best way to recharge your batteries. Also reevaluating your work style. I know it's really hard when you're working at home and then like your work is your life. So just keep it this in mind. This is actually one of the best ways that you can always recall if you are getting burned out or not. Whenever you feel like you have no proper balance between your work and your personal life, or as if your work is part of your personal life, you've already hit burned out. Burnout happens when we prioritize our work over personal life, or vice versa, to be honest. There's this thing called emotional burnout that happens too. But signs of burnout can be anything from like, it used to take you like a couple minutes to respond by an email. Now it takes you 10 minutes to an hour to sometimes a day or a few days. Even though it's a quick response, that's one of those signs of burnout. The other thing is, no matter how much sleep you get, it doesn't feel enough. You find yourself drinking a lot more caffeine to keep you going. You might be reaching for anything to help with the break. And by break, I mean people do drink a lot. Or they will smoke a lot more. So just keep that in mind. When you start seeing these signs, that's one. The other thing is when your emotions are all over the place. So say, for example, you can get really sad suddenly or really angry suddenly. That's another thing of a contribute to a burnout. All right, so here we go. Do you think we should increase focus on educating the public on internet safety? I think this would go a long way in defeating negative beliefs of the hacker community. I agree completely. Anything that helps to educate the public about security. Now, most of the time, the conversations I have with people outside of InfoSec, they're like, but I'm not a target. So why do I need to have this long password? Why do I need to use a password manager? Why do I need to use a 2FA? I'm not a target. And having that conversation about that is a whole different thing. I think the other thing is going off of that question, we can also do that around stalkerware. I think that's one of the things that is a huge opening for us to help out as a community, because there's a lot more stalkerware out there that is happening to so many women that have become victims, and also men as well. And we need to do something about that. So putting out there how to protect yourself on these things, I think that's important. I think that is one. Also, deep fakes is another. We're seeing a lot of cases where men want to do basically take women's faces and then they'll put them in a porn hub and whatnot, and that's not cool either. So these are things that we can do is to help bring awareness to these type of things, but also those that are deeply impacted, that are underrepresented in the world and in society, and helping them I think that is a winning point, because we need people to trust us. And how are they going to trust us unless we do something good for them too? So yes, I love that question. I've been thinking about this all the time. I'm still waiting here for questions, so don't worry. I'll just hang out here.
There's a little bit of delay between
Yeah,
when we post the questions.
If people feel uncomfortable, you're more than welcome to also DM me on Twitter. I can understand that if you are shy. I see someone typing. It's so exciting. Okay. Should the hacker community do more days and events like breaking the stereotype? This is what hackers look like. Yes, but the thing is that we've been doing is that we're only marketing it to ourselves within the community. So we need to actually go outside our own community to do this. I really like the breaking the stereotype thing, but it really was targeted to just us in InfoSec and also kind of for tech. So we need to go beyond that. So that means like do not Instagram or tagging certain companies, organizations, and whatnot. That's something that we do need to do. Do you think that's effective? Yes, I definitely do think it's effective. The thing I like about the breaking the stereotypes, this is what hackers look like. I think it was also a way to showcase that not everyone who's a hacker is a white male. And I think that's one of the things that was really cool to be part of, in the sense, is to showcase that, hey, we also got women in here. We have people from all different backgrounds that got into this space, and we are here as well. So I really like that, because it did do that at least. So there was something that came out for sure. And I think anything that helps make our community better is always a positive thing too. But yeah, I think if we do a lot more of breaking the stereotype kind of thing and kind of market it in a way that's outside the InfoSec community, I think that's probably a winning goal for us to do.
There was one more question about how, for someone new to this community, how would you suggest they will report vulnerabilities they may find?
Right. So for someone who's new on this, I would first find out a little bit, do some searching around on Google and see if anyone has any reports or feedback or reviews of how it went for them when they reported a vulnerability. That's one. The other thing is that if you're a beginner, I tend to recommend people to not submit vulnerabilities unless it has a VDP program or a bug bounty program. And the reason for that, it kind of gives you an extra protection, because there's a middleman platform, usually Bugcrowd, HackerOne, or Synac, or other ones that are there to help you and coach you through that process too. So yeah, I really recommend that. Also checking out disclose.io. That's a really good list, so you have their contact information. Also, please, if you do find a vulnerability, please don't exploit it. I've had many people come up to me, and by coming up to me, they'll tell me at conferences, or they'll DM me saying, hey, I found this vulnerability that I really want to report. And then always my first question is it in scope? And they're like, well, I don't know what the scope is. And I'm like, did you exploit? And they're like, well, I had to test it out. So yeah, I made a purchase getting their credit card information and all that. I was like, oh no, this is not how you do it. So yeah, don't do that, please. Okay. Oh yeah, I like this question. This thing, one part that surprised me was how many mothers are in InfoSec. My bubble really bursted on that one, and since I started following and seeing that it's really common. Yeah, it's really common. There's lots of mothers and fathers out there that are in the hacker space, which is wonderful. Would it be useful using an example as cop and robbers or medicine and researchers to demonstrate the difference, or like children books? Yeah, I know usually we use the common one is the robber one, right? So what's the difference between someone who's a locksmith versus someone who basically lockpick their way in without your permission? That's one way how to do it. I always say, like, the ethical and non-ethical, one has received permission or is not willing and is not trying to exploit it. The other thing I tend to tell people is that ethical hackers are the ones that they would feel guilty if they did something bad, in a sense. And that's a real differentiator right there, right? Is that if you experience guilt, then you understand you did something wrong. And so that's the thing. All right. Or like children, or am I sleep deprived and saying stupid stuff? Nope, not at all. When I try to explain people, I kid you not, some of the stories, like when I tell people I work with hackers or I work in the hacker community, hands down, people's reactions are insane sometimes. Like I once got in an Uber and the person was like, "So what do you do?" I'm like, "Oh, I work in the hacker community." And then right away they were like, "Can you do me a favor? So my girlfriend, I think she's cheating on me. Can you get into her account for me? I'll give you her Instagram." Yeah, I just don't get people sometimes. I take my kids to DEF CON. I would recommend a significant increase in programs like Roots. Oh, I love Roots. Oh my God. Yes. And I love that people know about Roots. Okay, kids are the future. Yes. We need to teach them what a hacker and cracker is, not let the news media and textbooks teach them. You are correct. Our textbooks are terrible. It doesn't usually showcase anything in history that's happened in the US, except for the good things that makes the US look good. Yeah, for sure. I always think that when people meet hackers, so say for example, like say if you're someone who wanted to let your grandparents know what a hacker is like, what they do and everything, bringing your friend over and talking about it openly, I think that's a really cool thing. Because when people meet someone, it changes the dynamic. So for example, remember in the talk, I talked about the person with pink hair is seen as a threat and whatnot. So imagine if you walked in the door and to your grandparents and the person who comes in the door has pink hair, your grandparents are gonna be like, but in reality of it is that they realize that there's something in common, that their grandchild is connected to this person with pink hair. So they have something in common. So then they're more willing to listen. So that's the whole thing, right? We only need to find one similarity for someone to listen and to start to trust us. And what that means is start having those awkward conversations with strangers and find something in common. And like, it could be anything. It could be like your favorite food. It could be like your favorite color. It could be your horoscope if you believe in horoscope. But that's the thing, is like having that one similar thing, that one common situation, it takes away the stranger aspect and makes us look like humans. And that's the thing that's really cool about knowing about the brain and how it functions, is that your amygdala is not going to set off any more warning, you're in danger messages. It's going to be like, oh, we can calm down. We can relax now. This person has likes the same color as I do. I don't feel as threatened anymore. Because remember, it was a survival mechanism to distinguish who's like us, who's not like us. And so knowing that is everything, because you can really change people's opinions of others when they meet them in person and find one thing that's in common. I see typing of more questions. But yeah, if anyone is interested in joining forces with me, I just tweeted, I think last week, about starting up a group of people that are going to help try to push basically that petition and make it come true. So that means working with the press, that means working with organizations to get public opinion out there, and showcasing different stories. It's going to be really important for us all. But like I said, if you feel uncomfortable asking publicly or whatnot, you can always DM me. Okay. This made me think of another thing. The hackers are criminals. Prejudice is one thing that you think would make a hacker community easily to relate to victims of racism, but lately I've seen so much of that around, especially after Marcus said he'd be giving OSCP for Black people as part of the Black Lives Matter. Yeah, it's one of those things that so the hacker community, the thing is that we're not really out in public about these kind of things because we're very afraid of public opinion of us, and we're worried about how public will reject us. And that's the thing, is that as humans, we're scared of being rejected by the herd, right? To some extent. And that's kind of the reason why we stay in our InfoSec community together, because we kind of get each other in some retrospect, right? But it's definitely prejudice that does keep us behind in society and whatnot. And it's sad, because the only way that we're going to fix it is by looking at ourselves and seeing, what am I doing wrong? But also for us to acknowledge that we need to look at ourselves and we need to find the right sources. And that's the other question, right? Is like, where's the right sources for this so I can learn more about this? And that's always the hard part, because if for the longest time, without representation, not having that same equal voice at a table, it causes situations where you don't have as many resources and you don't know where to find those kind of resources. So it's really, really important is that we need to push out more in the tech community, I think, in general, because we need to have more representation there, because there's still a lot of people in tech that are afraid of the hacker community. So we need to change that, of course, because we are within the tech community anyway, as it is. Well, we're in the tech industry, let's just put it that way. So we need to make sure of that.
Thank you again, Chloe. You have been amazing. I cannot thank you enough for supporting us in the community.
Thank you guys for having me. This was awesome. Thank you, Omar.
Absolutely.